Well, last time we discussed that there were several methods by which one leaves the body, different paths. So the paths we pointed out were the path of Pitrayana and the path of Devayana, the path which is Uttarayana and the path which is Dakshinayana. The path of Uttarayana is the path that is taken by liberated souls who go back to the sun and go back to the spiritual kingdom. This is usually for those who are liberated souls. And the path of Devayana is meant for those people who are pious, have performed pious deeds, have performed great sacrifices, and having lived pious lives, they have still desires left to accomplish. They take the path of Dakshinayana. I also discussed the path which is taken by advanced yogis who are taking the path which is that of Ichha Maran, that by shutting all the 9 gates of the body in a yogic posture, concentrating the pran on the top of the head and one's mind in one's heart, and loudly chanting Om and remembering God, they go back to the spiritual kingdom. But what about everybody else? What is the path taken by normal people? What is the path taken by people of this day and age in Kali Yuga? And how do they leave the body? So, we must understand that for most people who are attached to the world, for people who are full of desires, leaving the body is not a pleasant experience. It's not a pleasant experience because largely it is a result of the attachments that we have towards the people and the things within this world. Classically, we have the examples of so many patients I have seen over the years who have simply refused surgery because they are afraid or they don't want to part with part of their body. I remember one young boy who came with an osteosarcoma of the leg, of the hip bone, and his femur was affected by osteosarcoma, and for that he needed his limb to be disarticulated. He refused. He said, "No, don't want to lose my leg. So I'd rather die than lose my leg." Or there was a lady who came with advanced breast cancer and she was a doctor. So I asked her, why did you wait so long, since you must, as a doctor, you knew what disease that you were having? And she said, "I would rather die than lose my breast." So imagine that you're not just losing a leg or a breast or an arm, but you're losing your whole body. And not just losing your whole body, but you're also losing everything that you've ever known. All the people around you, all the things that you thought you or you believed you possessed, all of them you're leaving behind. And that pain of leaving things behind which you're attached to is indeed the fear and the pain of death. I remember one gentleman came to me and he told me that my Pandit told me that the pain of death is like being bitten by 1,000 scorpions. And since he had seen a scorpion bite one of his friends, he was terrified. I said, "Your Pandit is wrong. The pain of death is not like being bitten by 1,000 scorpions. According to the Garud Purana, the pain of death is compared to being bitten by 42,000 scorpions. And this pain is directly dependent upon the attachments you have in the world and to the things of this world. So one of the things that we have to do as we progress in this world is that we need to become detached from the things and the people in our lives. Because to the extent we become detached from them, or at least to the extent we do not become attached to them, we have a relatively comfortable leaving of this body and transmigration. Of course, you might say that what is the easiest way of doing this? You can't go through life saying, I am detached from this one, I'm detached from that one, I'm detached from this, I'm detached from that. It's very simple, actually, according to Bhagavad-Geeta. Simply attach to God, and the more you are absorbed in God and attached to God, the more naturally you will become detached from the world. Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Parojita Janayati Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha Yada Hitakam. If you worship Krishna in the prescribed manner, then effortlessly, naturally, even without realizing it, you will acquire both detachment from the world as well as spiritual knowledge. So, what happens to those who are, when they leave the body, they have a choice. And that choice is usually decided by how they've lived their lives. And what do you mean by how they've lived their lives? You have an option of being judged at the time of death, what everybody calls judgment day in different religions. In this Vedic religion, the judgment day is being judged by the Hindu god of death and justice, who is Yama or Yamaraj. He is also known as Kala, and he is also known as Dharamraja. So you should understand that the Yamaraj is none other than Krishna himself. In chapter 10, verse 29, Krishna says, Anantas chashmi naganam varuno yadasamaham pitrinam aryama chasmi yama samyamatam aham. Among snakes I am Anantanag, among aquatics I am Varuna, among the departed ancestors I am Aryama, and among the dispensers of law I am Yamaraj, the Lord of Death. So Krishna comes for all of us at the time of death. For those who are devotees of Krishna, he comes as Krishna. And that is what we want. But for those who are averse to Krishna, those who have been avoiding Krishna, he comes as Yamaraj. And who is Yamaraj? Yamaraj appears on Judgment Day. He is accompanied by Chitragupt, who is a scribe who has noted all the good deeds and all the bad deeds you have done. And after enumerating all the good deeds and bad deeds, then Yamaraj is the judge of the dead. So Yamaraj is having 4 arms, protruding fangs, complexion of storm clouds with an angry expression. He's surrounded by a garland of flames. He holds a noose or a mace. He rides a water buffalo. And he holds that noose in his hand, which is a rope, and with which he seizes the lives of people who are about to die. He is also seen carrying a danda, which is a staff. And thus, Yamaraj is confronted by most people at the time of death. And when they are confronted at the time of death, Yamaraj then directs them towards hell, towards heaven, or he may direct them by avoiding them altogether and letting Krishna take over. So who are those who escape Yamaraj? And who are those who do not escape Yamaraj? This is a very important point. And this has been described in the Bhagavad-Geeta also. In the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna says in the second verse, second chapter, 40th verse, Neha Bikramo Nashosti Pratyavayana Vidyate Swalpam Apyasya Dharmasya Trayato Mahato Bhayat. When one makes some progress on this path of devotion to God, there is no loss or there is no diminution, no adverse result. And even a little effort will save you from the greatest danger, Mahato Bhayat, the greatest fear. What is the greatest fear? The greatest fear is that we will have to meet with Yamaraj and be judged. Therefore, in the Bhajagovindam by Adi Shankaracharya and his disciples, in the Bhajagovindam, verse 21, it states, Bhagavad-Geeta kinchita dita Ganga jallava kanikka pita Sakridapi yena murari samarcha kriyate tasya yamena na charcha. If you have just studied Bhagavad-Gita a little bit, if you've just taken one drop of Ganges water or Ganga water in a spirit of surrender and devotion, if only once in your life you have thrown your arms up and told Lord Krishna that I am yours, there will be no argument with Yamaraj. There will be no discussion with Yamaraj. Yamena na charcha. So here you see that the Bhagavad Gita verse 2.40 and the Bhajagovindam verse 21, they coincide. And you can also see there's a verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, which is, I think, taken from the Ramayana. It says very clearly, Sakrideva prapanno yas tavasmiti cha yachate abhayam sarvada tasmai dadami etad vratam mama. It is my vow, but God is speaking, it is my vow if one only seriously surrenders unto me, saying, my dear Lord, from this day I am yours, and prays to me for courage, I shall award courage to this person and I will rescue him and keep him safe from that moment on. So once again, through surrender to God, one can avoid any discussion or argument with Yamaraj. But it is further described that there are certain exemptions from being judged by Yamaraj. And what are these exemptions by which you avoid being judged by Yamaraj? Well, first and foremost, a very good example would be that a person who fights as a warrior in battle and he perishes performing his duty on the battlefield, such a person bypasses Yamaraj completely. Otherwise, typically, those who are, of course, attained salvation, I've already discussed with the other previous parts of leaving the body and not coming back. in transmigration. But in the Adi Puran, Krishna is asked by Arjuna that, my dear Krishna, I want to go to heaven. Now, please understand that in Vedic philosophy, in Vedic religion, heaven and hell are not permanent abodes. They are temporary abodes. And these temporary abodes, you go there, exhaust your good or bad karmas in heaven or hell, and when they are exhausted, you come back and you're reborn here according to the merits that you have attained so far. So, Krishna, typically in the Bhagavad-Gita, you have examples where in 9.20, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna that Traividya Mama Soma Paputa Papa Yagner Ishtva Swarga Gatim Prarthayante Te Punyam Asadya Surendra Lokam Ashnanti Divyan Divi Deva Bhogan. So those who study the Vedas, those who drink Soma juice, those who seek the heavenly planets, they worship Krishna indirectly. They worship me indirectly. And they take birth on the planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. And then Krishna explains that that is not a permanent abode. In 9.21, Krishna explains, Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam kshine punya martyalokam vishanti. Evam trayi dharmam anuprapanna gata gatam kama labante. So having enjoyed their pleasures in heaven, they return to this mortal planet once again. Thus, following Vedic principles and practices, they achieve only flickering happiness. Krishna has pointed out that the Vedas actually deal only with material nature and how to handle it, including heaven and hell, which are all part of the material nature system. They are all part of the material nature system. Therefore, he says that the Vedas deal with three gunas. And Arjun, please understand that you have to transcend these three gunas of Prakriti. And thus, in 9.22, Krishna points out that whatever is done for Krishna, whatever is done as being absorbed in God, Krishna, the Supreme Lord, all that is permanent. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nitya bhiruktanam yoga kshemam vahamyam. So this is often translated erroneously by pointing out that Krishna is saying that I will provide whatever you need in the material world, which he does, of course. That is his primary occupation. But he is saying here that just like you go to Swargalok by performing Vedic rites and worshipping Indra, you come back. But those who worship me, for them, I preserve the spiritual merit that they have, and I provide further opportunities for them to come closer to me by giving them opportunities to earn more spiritual credits to come back. So you don't lose anything. Therefore, he says, Nahi kalyana krit kaschid durgatim tata gacchati in the 6th chapter. That a person who does good is never overcome by evil. A person who's engaged in spiritual practices is never overcome by Prakriti, by material nature. And he points out that what happens to a person who's yoga bhrasht, one who takes to the path of worshipping the divine to become free from Prakriti. And while he takes the path to become divine and free from Prakriti, he is not successful because somewhere he falters and somehow it does not complete. So Krishna says in the 6th chapter, Prapya punya kritam lokan ushitva shashvati samah suchinam shrimatam gehe yoga brashta vijayate. That yes, you will go to the planet, the superior planets where all pious people dwell. And having enjoyed there, you will finally come back and you'll be reborn into a family that is both pious as well as wealthy. So you don't have to struggle for your livelihood. And this Krishna promises. This is this ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paryupasate tesham nityabhyukta nam yoga kshemam vahamyam. So Arjun says to Krishna that yes, I want to go to heaven too, but I don't want to perform all these Vedic rites and ceremonies and offerings to Indra and go to Indralok or Surendralokam. So Krishna says, Arjuna, I will give you a way by which you need not, even those who do not perform Vedic sacrifice can go to heaven. Again, I'm telling you that heaven is not the ideal place that one aims to go to. One should aim to become free from Prakriti and go back to God, become free from the cycle of birth and death. But if there is someone who wants to go to heaven still, right? He doesn't want to be liberated. Then in the Adi Puran, Krishna declares, Annadau Jaladaschaiva Aturascha Chikitsaka Trividim Swargam Ayanti Vina Yagnina O Bharata. Very simply it says, those who provide food, water, or medical help to the needy, they will attain the heavenly realm without any need for rituals or sacrifices. So this is very important, that simply by performing charitable acts of food, water, medical help, one goes to heaven. So now we come to the question of hell. Now hell is a place where Yamaraj sends those who have performed evil deeds. And what kind of evil deeds and what kind of hells? The hells that are described in the scriptures are terrible hells. There are countless hells. There are innumerable hells. But although there are countless and innumerable hells, there it has been described that 21 of them or even 28 of them are specifically notable and worthy of mention. And I would be remiss if I did not talk about them. At the time of death, a person who has committed sinful acts, who is engaged in tamaguni activity out of choice, such a person is taken by the Yamaduts and taken to hell. So, since many people are skeptical, what is this Yamadut business? I must explain to you about one person I know who engaged in taking intoxication. And what intoxication did he take? He took, at the time of Shivratri, he went and he took bhang. And that dose of bhang was a little excessive. So when that dose of bhang was excessive, he fell and he collapsed. Fortunately, he was in the company of other doctors. And what they did was they revived him. But he has an experience of a near-death experience. And this near-death experience he had, he explained to me, was with ghoulish, horrific characters who came and surrounded him and were ready to take him, he said, God knows where. So he had an actual vision of the Yamaduts. Fortunately, he was resuscitated. And because he was resuscitated, he survived for a considerable period beyond that. So I won't go into the details of all these 28 hills or 21 hills. Tamishra, Andha Tamishra, Maharaurava, Raurava, Mahanaraka, and so on and so forth. Because each of them are specific and designed for people who have performed dreadful acts. For people who have grabbed another person's wealth or wife or children, they are in Tamishra, they are bound with ropes and starved without food, and they're constantly beaten by the Yamaduts. And in Andha Tamishra, he loses both his sight as well as his intelligence. In Raurava, those who care little for other living beings and harm them, these living beings hurt by such a man take the form of savage serpent-like beasts called Rurus and torture them. So there's a whole description of these 28, and there are innumerable hells beyond that, of which only these 28 have been largely described. What about a person who's performed good deeds and bad deeds? A person who's performed good deeds experiences heaven, and a person who's performed bad deeds experiences hell. In the Mahabharata, towards the conclusion, when one by one the Pandavas fall along the path that Yudhishthir is leading them on, finally Yudhishthir meets with his father Yamaraj. And when he meets with his father Yamaraj, he wants to know, where are his brothers, the Pandavas? And Yamaraj shows him that these Pandavas are suffering in hell. He is shocked. He thought that the Pandavas are the heroes. They are on the right side. They are fighting for what is right. And how did they go to hell? Then he says, where are the Kauravas? And then Yamaraj reveals to him that the Kauravas are enjoying in heaven. And as he sees the Kauravas enjoying in heaven, he thinks that this is all crazy. Life is not fair. I mean, a lot of us feel like that life is not fair, even though God is good. But when he sees the Kauravas in heaven and the Pandavas in hell, he is very disturbed. And then Yamaraj shows him the next phase, where the Pandavas go to heaven and the Kauravas go to hell. And for those who have performed a large number of evil deeds and have a long sojourn in hell or hells, they experience heaven first. Whereas those who have performed a large number of good deeds and a small amount of bad deeds, they experience hell first and heaven later. This is what Yamaraj explains to Yudhishthir. So, the question is, what is heaven and what is hell? So, I'd like to give you my impression of what I believe. Of course, we all know that heaven and hell are also here. Heaven is in our minds, and heaven and hell is also in our minds. Your mind itself is a source of heaven. Your mind itself is a source of hell. So what happens when you leave this body? When the soul leaves the body, for those who do not attain salvation, the gross body is left behind. That is, the body of flesh and blood is left behind. Bhumi apo nalo vayur kham is left behind. The mano buddhir ahankar travels to the next body. The linga sharira, the karmas that the person has, the bundle of desires that the person has, the mind, the intelligence, and the ego, they accompany you from one body to the next. Now, in this life, all of us have experienced hell. And when we experience hell, we try to distract ourselves. What do? We can put on the television, we can watch a movie, we can go and watch the sunrise or the sunset. We can go and lie on the grass and look into the sky. We can phone a friend. We can talk it over with somebody who's near and dear to us. We can find a shoulder to cry on. All this is possible because you have a physical body. When you leave the physical body, that is, the soul leaves the physical body, it experiences the positive and the negative effects that is stored within your subtle body, within your mind, intelligence, and ego, your chitta, your memories, you experience with fullest intensity both the positive and the negative that you carry with you from one body to the next. And of course, when you're traveling between bodies, in the process of transmigration, you do not have any access to a phone, to a TV, to a friend, to nature. You suffer it with fullest intensity. And the negativity that you carry with you in your minds, all the anger, all the rage, all the resentment, all the fear, all the negativity that you carry with you, you experience in fullest negativity without any opportunity for distraction. That is narak, with all its variations. And for those who perform good deeds and pious deeds and have done wonderful things, when they leave their body, they also experience all the positive things they had in their life, but which were probably denied to them by public criticizing them, by some enemy saying something against them, by being bitten by insects or mosquitoes. All these things distracted you from enjoying the positive effects of all the good deeds you have done. But when you are in between two bodies, all the good that you've done, all the wonderful deeds that you've performed, all of them you experience now with fullest intensity. And that fullest intensity is known as Swarg. This is my humble submission. This is the difference between heaven and hell. So in this life, if we are able to cleanse our minds of both heaven and hell, how do we do that? We do that by opting out from Prakriti, for opting in towards achieving and attaining Godhead. And how do we do that? We do that very simply by remembering God, being absorbed in Him, and forgetting ourselves. It has been described that Harer Nam, Harer Nam, Harer Nam eva kevalam, kalau naste eva naste eva naste eva gatiranyata. The hard disk of your mind becomes formatted when you chant the holy name. And by the constant chanting of the holy name, And by engaging yourself in activities offered to God in a spirit of devotion and renunciation, the hard disk of the positive and negative in your mind becomes cleansed. Shubha ashubha falair moksha se karma bandhane sannyas yoga yuktena vimukto mami vashyasi. So Krishna says, do everything for him. Yat karoshi, yad ashnasi, yat juhosi, dadasi, yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushoma darpanam. Remember God, forget yourself. And if you do that, you will become pure. And when you leave this body, just like the gross body goes to its elements, earth goes to earth, air goes to air, fire goes to fire, etc. When you leave this body, your mind, intelligence, and ego will also go to the subtle elements of Prakriti. And the soul, being unencumbered by Prakriti, because it has remembered God and forgotten self, it will go back to Him. And you will become free from the cycle of birth and death and reunite with the divine, with God, with Krishna. So I will stop here. If there are any queries or questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Shantuji, for today's wonderful session. So my first question is, in modern life, how can the teachings on transmigration help us live more mindfully?
Can you repeat that?
Uh, in modern life, how can the teachings on transmigration help us live more mindfully?
So if we realize that everything that we do is being recorded, all your positive actions, all your positive deeds, your positive thoughts, your positive words, they're being recorded in your mind. Well, they're recorded by Chitragupt, no doubt, but they're definitely recorded in your mind. And all the negativity that you experience in this life, the anger, the rage, the fear, the depression, the resentment, all those negative emotions, they are also stored in your mind. And that helps you to experience heaven and hell. If you want to become free from the cycle of birth and death, because this world is really a dukhalayam ashashvatam, a place of misery where everything is temporary. This is a anityam asukham lokam. This is a world where everything is temporary and you cannot find lasting happiness. Where janma mrityu jara vyadhi dukha doshanu darshanam. That birth, death, old age, disease, fault, misfortune, and happiness are guaranteed to everyone. So if you engage in remembering God and forgetting self, you will purify yourself, suffer less in this life, and you will escape the judgment of Yamaraj at the time of death. You will avoid hell, and you will go back to Godhead.
My second question to you is, how can one break free from the cycle of rebirth according to Gita's teachings?
That's what Krishna explains here in this chapter which you are covering. He explains that whatever you think of at the time of death, that's what you get. So you think of your daughter at the time of death, that's the direction you will go. You think of your son at the time of death, that's the direction you will go. If you think of someone you hate at the time of death, you're surely going to land up somewhere near that person. So he says, yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajante ante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavita. That whatsoever, whatever, whomsoever you think of at the time of death, that is where you go. But he says, ante kale chamam eva smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samad bhavam naste atra asaushaya. So if you think of God at the time of death, because all your life you've lived your life for Him, then remembering God and forgetting self, you go back to Him. And you become free from the cycle of birth and death.
Thank you so much for today's enlightening session, Shantnuji. It was wonderful talking to you and listening to you today. For our viewers, if you liked it too, then do share this video with your loved ones. Also, stay tuned as we meet again next Thursday at 8 a.m. for yet another session on the Bhagavad-Gita. Hare Krishna.
So Jai Shri Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hari Om.